Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. The energy warfare is in full swing. Russia is attacking Ukrainian civil energy infrastructure, which is causing massive blackouts in the capital and other cities in Kiev. The difference of this year compared to previous one, however, is that Ukraine is now striking back. And Russia is starting to notice, especially because Ukraine has a devious plans on what they want to target. Beyond that, there is a massive anti-corruption case right now surfacing in Ukraine, and also Ukraine is planning on producing Gripens inside of the country as well. These news and more in today's Ukraine Daily News Show. Let's begin. We start by talking about the strikes that Ukraine is conducting in Russia, because it is absolutely clear that Ukraine is trying to leverage their ability to conduct long-range strikes to put maximum pressure on Russia. Recently, there has been a strike against the Tuapse harbor area. The attack on a berth was confirmed by the regional authorities. The head of the Tuapse municipal district of Krasnodar region, Sergei Boyko, initially wrote in his official statement about the attack of maritime drones, but later deleted the information. And the way that he actually turned it was great. He stated that 4 maritime drones had been neutralized in the Black Sea near Tuapse. One of them detonated near the shoreline, and the blast wave damaged 2-story building, a garage, and a boat hangar. So, I mean, everything is beautiful in this place. So it's apparently sea drones that were neutralized even before they reached the targets, but apparently the explosion was of one of these drones, because the other one was just neutralized, was so powerful that it damaged even some buildings near the harbor area. I mean, it's clear that he tries to state that it wasn't the drone that was shut down and then just debris of the drone fell down, because that doesn't work with maritime drones, but it is very clear what is happening here. And what is impressive about this strike is just how far it was, because for Ukraine to launch a drone, they would need to launch it somewhere from around this area, and then the drone would need to swim all the way here and strike around Tuapse region here. So, to be honest, that is around 1,000 kilometers. That is a pretty heavy distance to cross by a maritime drone. And besides that, it was also carrying explosives and payloads and other stuff and the secure connection. It's a very impressive operation, and I mean, more to come. Drones attack major energy facility in Russia's Voronezh. Overnight on Sunday, November the 9th, drones attacked Voronezh CHPP-1, combined heat and power plant in Russia, the city's largest supplier of heat for residential buildings and, more importantly, major industrial enterprises. The installed capacity is 378.3 megawatts, and the heat output is 1,389.3 gigacalories per hour. CHPP-1 supplies heating to 4 districts of Voronezh, as well as more than 1,000 enterprises, including the city's largest plant, Voronezh Synthos Caoutchouc. And with this strike, some experts noted an interesting strategy, because Russia's overall energy capacity is pretty large. The Soviet Union built a lot of potency inside of the Russian energy system. But there is a flaw. So the thing is that, to put it conceptually, so imagine this is Moscow. This is like the heart of Russia. And while the general capacity, total capacity in Russia is very large, and Ukraine would need to do a lot of strikes inside Russia to take that capacity out, generally speaking, Moscow is really hanging by just a couple of these threads, and I'm simplifying very much so here. So what Ukraine seemingly wants to do is they want to reduce the input that is going into Moscow. And their current strategy is to prevent Moscow to receive power specifically during peak hours. So to start smothering Russia by just how much capacity is available for Moscow to operate at critical times, especially those critical times are in winter. Now, I think this absolutely makes sense, especially because this is just the start of Ukrainian campaign against the Russian energy infrastructure, because, again, I don't think it was the plan of Ukraine to actually strike these civilian targets. But as President Zelensky warned Russia that if they will continue striking energy infrastructure in Ukraine, then Ukraine will just respond in the same sense. So it just makes sense to respond in a fashion that actually hurts Russia. Resistance groups continue operating inside Russia and sabotage their logistics. Resistance groups near Vologda and in Sterlimak set fire to a railway relay cabinet and equipment on 3 communication towers. The fight against the Russian army supply line continues at the turn of October and November 2025. Members of the resistance in Russia destroyed 4 key objects of the aggressor state's logistics infrastructure, the statement from them reads. Some time ago, we got reports of Ukrainian strikes inside the occupied Donetsk region of Ukraine. And it was reported that the strikes were against facilities where Shahed drones were stored by. Now we finally have satellite images that are showing the damage inflicted, and it is pretty impressive. Satellite image confirms the destruction of 2 warehouses storing Shahed-type strike drones and their warheads at the Donetsk airport. OSIN channel Dnipro published the images. Judging by the photos, 1 concrete building was completely destroyed, likely by a secondary detonation of warheads, and second building was partially damaged. The roof collapsed over roughly half its area. The total damage was estimated at just over 1,000 Shahed drones, and it sounds like it's a lot, but in reality, some people estimate that it's about 1 week's production at maximum for current Russian industries. More strikes against the railway oil facilities, this time in Likhovskaya oil depot in Russian Rostov region. We already know the difference. So whenever Ukraine tries to strike strategically at the Russian oil capacity, they would strike refining facilities. And if they want to disrupt the flow of gas and oil products to the front lines, then they would strike these storage locations, usually much closer to the Ukrainian border. Rostov region is exactly close to Ukrainian border. We now have reports from both sides. Both Russians are reporting, but also Ukrainians as well, that finally Kakhovka reservoir has been drying up enough for a light infantry to already move through it. So all of this discussion that we had about when this Dnipro River basin that has been colored for a while now like this, when it's going to be a battleground, when it's going to be dry enough? Well, the answer is it is now. So all of this area right now is going to be attacked most likely by Russians, because Russians have the idea of attacking as much as they can. But we also heard some reports from Russians that Ukrainians were advancing in the area, and they actually captured a lot of key locations in so-called island regions of this ex-water storage basin. Corruption in Ukraine has exploded in the news, but more importantly, in a very positive context, in the context of anti-corruption, fight against corruption. If we can say that, generally speaking, Ukraine has been improving in their fight against corruption, President Zelensky has been more transparent, talking with a lot of partners. There has been a lot of different international institutions introduced to Ukraine that verified how the different funds were performing. But there were still things happening in Ukraine, specifically in some of the Ukrainian top cabinets. And it was always the idea of when finally the anti-corruption institutions are going to deliver on this. When finally we will see some kind of high-profile case that will set and prove to everyone sort of like an exam for testing for how well Ukrainian fight against corruption has been developing so far. And the case has finally came up. Ukraine is now delving deep into this test period to see how far they have advanced in fighting corruption. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine announced the exposure of a corruption scheme in the energy sector. The main activity of the criminal organization was the systematic receipt of unlawful benefits from Energoatom's contractors amounting to 10 to 15% of contracts value. According to the Post, Energoatom's contractors were forced to pay kickbacks to avoid blockaded payments for deliveries of goods or services, or to keep supplier status. The practice was known as, quote-unquote, the barrier. In practice, the management of this strategic enterprise with the unannounced income of over 200 billion UA hryvnias, they have carried not only official executives, but the outside individuals who had no formal authority yet assumed the role of overseers, the Bureau said. According to the Bureau, members of the criminal organization built a large-scale corruption network influencing strategic state sector enterprises, including Energoatom. And there is a video, you can try seeing it. I don't know if it has subtitles, you should check it by yourself. And this is a massive scheme. The connections lead to top ministries. There is also apparently some Russian oligarch involved in this, because obviously he is. So why this is important? Well, obviously it's an anti-corruption case, and very high-profile anti-corruption case under Zelensky's government. And more importantly, this is the most typical case of Ukrainian corruption. Ukrainians have been pretty good fighting corruption on a lot of other levels, but two things still remain, specifically businesses and this government-type corruption where there are kickbacks required for different types of services. So this basically strikes at the core of the problem. So this actually tackles the proper thing there is for Ukraine to solve. So outcomes of this case will define whether Ukraine has truly advanced or it is still in words only. A lot of people will be watching this case, myself included. It is especially important because details of the case also describe that the kickbacks that they were acquiring, they were actually prohibiting the services to be working during the Russian campaign on attacking Ukraine in the winter of last year. So these corruption facilities, they actually hurt all citizens of Ukraine. It is literally Ukrainians dying and freezing because of corruption. So now the new year has come with new challenges. Current Russian campaign against Ukrainian energy infrastructure is aiming to be a pretty massive one. Russia is pretty capable at striking targets in Ukraine. So right now, the whole Monday, that was this day, was pretty much without energy in Kyiv. There are reports that other cities in Ukraine are also without energy. It's going to be a very tough winter. Now, with that said, I definitely think we'll need to help Ukraine in any way we can. Specifically, generators would be very nice. But also Ukrainians have their own generators and there will be unbreakability points. Ukrainians are strong. They will survive this. It will be tough nonetheless. And again, corruption fight is going to be the thing that's going to define how Ukraine is going to go in the future. To be honest, a lot of the even problems in the Ukrainian military can be sort of led to the same rotten system. But the help is coming, and Ukraine secured 300 million cubic meters of American liquefied natural gas amid Russians' attacks on gas infrastructure. Naftogaz, Ukraine's state-owned oil and gas giant, has secured 300 million cubic meters of American gas through Polish energy firm Orlen as the country scrambles to prevent a gas crisis in the winter. The agreement, which was signed on November 7th, will see Orlen deliver three cargoes of American liquefied natural gas to Ukraine in the first quarter of 2026. The Polish company said in a press statement Orlen will import the cargoes in one of the two terminals where the LNG will be regasified and transmitted with pipelines to Ukraine. Really great couple of big news for Ukraine receiving the frozen Russian assets. This has been mulled over a lot, and I feel we finally are getting there. There were two big things that was preventing this. When was discussion last time, Belgium said that they still wanted additional guarantees to release the bulk of some of the funds that they're holding. And second was that US at the time was stating that they do not back the program for supplying Ukraine with the help from the Russian frozen assets. Since then, US official position has changed. So now the officials in Brussels don't have the ability to hide behind this. It's very common in European politics to hide behind the words coming from United States. It's a very cowardly tactic, but this is who we are. And the second part was the guarantees for the supply of these funds from Brussels, and what can be guaranteed was actually considered right now in Norway. Norway has a major 1.8 trillion fund that they actually were really successfully additionally funding after the Russian invasion into Ukraine. So now there is a move in Norway to help guarantee Brussels the risks from this fund. So Brussels is more encouraged to actually release the fund and help Ukraine continue fighting on. It would release total of from 140 to 180 billion euros of funds to Ukraine, which would be a massive contributor to Ukraine, together with the support that there is going to be going from the Germans and Swedes and other countries. It will definitely put Ukraine in an extremely solid position, very, very strong, and will allow Ukraine to fight very comfortably, if I can use this term for a warfare, for the next couple of years, which instantly will put absolutely different calculation for Russia, because Putin's calculation is that he can outlast Europe, that he can outlast Ukraine. With the release of these funds, it will be a very strong signals that no, it's not going to happen. No near outlasting is in sight for Putin. There is now mass recruitment of reservists in Russia. They're stating that it's going to be to guard critical infrastructure. The most direct and obvious scenario here is that they will be put to safeguard Russian oil facilities against Ukrainian strikes. However, Ukraine is developing their drones more and more, and now drones are becoming a lot more complex. So for Russians to actually fight against these drones, it's not going to be as easy. But more importantly, we now get more and more reports of Ukraine using Flamingo missiles, which are cruise missiles, and those are not as easy to intercept as the drones, and their striking capabilities are on a whole different level. So this will definitely benefit Russia to try to protect their oil infrastructure, but it's not a 100% solution. But more importantly, with these recruits, is that in the law that calls up these reservists, nothing states that these reservists cannot be conscripted into the Russian military. So most likely we will have major internal propaganda campaign and pressure campaign on these new people that are going to be conducting operations in this new Russian semi-military, I don't know how you call it. All Russia is military now, but these branch of guardians of Russian profit margins, they will be there and they will be up for grabs and for taking. So I think it will be very easy to assume that they will be forcefully recruited and pressured to be recruited into the actual Russian military to go into Ukraine. And finally, a lot of them supposedly will be deployed on the border with some of the Baltic nations. So this is potentially the start and the force that Russia could use for provocations on the NATO's eastern flank. Additional details appear in the Ukrainian plans with Gripens, specifically in the area of localization of production of these planes inside of Ukraine. And so far, it seems that it's going to be a little bit far longer, long-term pipeline here, aiming for 2023 as a start day, which is a bit off. So we should not expect that Ukraine will be producing its own Gripens in any kind of near future. And finally, we've seen a lot of these Russian Frankenstein tanks that they're now turning, I don't even know what, like they call hedgehogs, they call it like some other names. They are getting absolutely wild, you know, the amount of different metal parts, all of these branches that you see on this tank, those are made from metal, those are metal wires. So they are really putting a lot of pressure on the tanks. And now the Russian mechanics themselves are reporting that this extra gear is actually causing a lot of additional wear on transmission and on other situation. Quote, in another company, they made a Tsar barbecue out of cables and it didn't even drive 10 kilometers before one of the sides failed. The load on the components is enormous and they fail much faster, the Russian army tank operator said. So hopefully more Russian tanks will fail before they can reach any kind of Ukrainian front line. Guys, appreciate your time for watching this video. Click subscribe button so more people can see this video by YouTube algorithms. Support Ukraine, trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.